Communist Party of Nepal leader KP Sharma Oli has staked his claim to become the Prime Minister of Nepal again. This comes after incumbent Prime Minister Pushpa Kamal Dahal, popularly known as Prachanda, stepped down after losing a vote of confidence in the parliament. Prachanda lost his fifth trust vote amidst political instability in the Himalayan nation. This interesting twist in Nepali politics comes as Oli inked a secret deal. Oli's bid for power has been endorsed by Sher Bahadur Deuba, another former Prime Minister of Nepal. Deuba has done so under the condition that he will be heading the government after 22 months. Meanwhile, speaking of Oli, he is a veteran Nepali communist politician. He's had a tumultuous political career marked by his nationalist rhetoric and clashes with, of course, India. He has earlier served as the Prime Minister of Nepal in 2015, 2016 and between 2018 and 2021, which is perhaps the most tumultuous period between India and Nepal politics as well. As Prime Minister Oli took a hardline stance against India, particularly during the 2015 Nepal blockade, which he blamed on Indian interference, his earlier tenures were marked by a growing tilt towards China. He initiated the BRI project in 2017 and now looks at implementing it. He has been notably silent with regards to the Chinese PLA's salami slicing of Nepal's territory as well. On the other hand, he has staked a claim on Indian territories and has even gone as far as updating Nepal's map to include these disputed territories. His prior tenures were characterized by strained relations with India. Will we see a rerun of this, or will he extend an olive branch to India is the big question. We also ask whether a Chinese hand is at play here and what are the ramifications of this or this change in leadership in Nepal for India. We'll talk about this with our guest. Ambassador Bhaspati Mukherjee is joining us on the show. Also with us is Professor S.D. Muni, former ambassador and Professor Emeritus to the School of International in JNU. Ambassador Manjeev Puri, former diplomat, also joins us on the show. Professor Madhav Nalapat, editorial director of the Sunday Guardian, also with us on the show. Last but not the least, Gautam Mukherjee, senior journalist, joins us on the platform as well. Professor Nalapat, I'll begin with you, sir. Sir, obviously, whenever Nepal addresses India or whenever there is politics to be discussed between India and Nepal, China cannot be left out of the equation. We have seen how the Chinese influence has only expanded and grown in the country of Nepal in the last few years. But, looking at what has happened in Nepal through the prism of what the Chinese want in Nepal, how would you characterize this change in leadership?
Well, I'd like to say that you correctly said that Prime Minister, once you call Oli, will have a definite affinity towards China. It comes from his ideology. Now, back in the after the UPA got elected in 2004, they launched a policy of trying to basically cozy up to the Communist Party of Nepal, and in that process, I think the Communist parties of Nepal was given significant incentives to ensure a better relationship with India. Unfortunately, that has not happened. And that is unlikely to happen given the sharp ideological differences that the Nepalese communists, all three of leaders of which are not, in my view, India friendly in the least. But that being the case, it is important to understand that I think Prime Minister Oli will understand that India is the only land route to Nepal, that India is very significant in the economy of Nepal, and free movement across the border, that particular allowance of free movement from Nepal to India and vice versa is again of great assistance to Nepal. So having said all that, Vineet, I think quite clearly that he will be guarded. He will be very guarded in his gestures, far more than he was in earlier stints when he finally had to be removed through no confidence motions. The point is, Vineet, that I think it is in 2008 that India was very helpful, let's put it that way, in toppling the monarchy from power in Nepal. Very, very helpful. And since then, Nepal has gone through, so many governments. I would say about 2 dozen or so governments. It's been marked by political instability ever since. I quite agree that the monarchy in Nepal was outdated, it was feudal, and it was definitely not friendly towards India. But had it been converted into a constitutional monarchy, if that were possible, and we have Professor Munian, who is much more an expert in Nepal than I am, then I think that would have been a better option to follow in hindsight than entirely dispensing with the monarchy and thereby bringing in a period of tremendous instability in the politics and governance of Nepal. Instability which is making it very difficult to predict how long a government will last, what a government's policies are going to be, and what its stance is going to be vis-a-vis India and China. As you correctly said, Prime Minister Oli was not friendly to India at all. He claimed Indian territories as Nepali territories. There's really no dispute about these territories. They are Indian territories. And he reached out to China in a very big way, including through the Belt and Road project. Possibly, I would think, for having an alternative land route other than India from Nepal. But that land route will be far too tortuous for any utility to Nepal. So I believe he'll be cautious. But at the same time, I don't believe he's going to be very India-friendly. So I think we have now got to be very, very watchful of the situation in Nepal and the emerging situation in Nepal. But the most main point is the Nepali people, the Nepali parliament decide who their leadership is going to be, not India, not any other power. So far as China is concerned, definitely it has tried to do that in the past. And I think it had quite a big hand in Oli coming. But I mean, possibly it has a hand in this as well, because Oli has been very trusted by the Chinese, much more than Madhav Kumar Nepal and Prachanda. But having said that, both Madhav Kumar Nepal and Prachanda have a deep distrust of Oli. So he'll have to move extremely cautiously, in my view. So I don't think we're going to see kind of theatrics that we saw in his previous administration. Vineet.
Good points there, sir. Ambassador Mukherjee, what are your expectations, or perhaps let me scratch that. What are your apprehensions, ma'am, when it comes to this Prime Minister taking over? We've already gotten a taste of what it's like to deal with Nepal when he's been at the helm.
The biggest problem of dealing with Nepal, and you have got my colleague Ambassador Manjeet Puri here, who's a much greater expert on Nepal, and Ambassador Muni also. So maybe you should pose the question to them first. But since you have asked me, let me contribute whatever I can to the debate. The biggest problem with Nepal is that we are a large country, and whatever we do is misunderstood by those who wish to misunderstand. This is very much like the relationship that the United States has with its smaller neighbors. That's the first issue. So you will often find Nepalese saying that, you know, India shouldn't have done this, India shouldn't have done that. But basically, in fact, with Nepal, right from the time that Nepal became independent, India has always stretched its hand out in friendship, in development cooperation, has done its best. And after the monarchy fell, there have been several problems that we've had with Nepal, particularly with Oli. The reason being, of course, his blatantly pro-Chinese bias, his claim on some of our territories, his approach to some of the Nepalese citizens of Indian origin, whom he doesn't regard as quite Nepalese, what you would call second-class citizens, his approach to the Belt and Route, and now the apprehension that once again, like it was, I think, in Ambassador Puri's time, there was a situation where I recall that there was a Chinese ambassador in Kathmandu who was actually, in a way, trying to guide the Nepalese Prime Minister on what to do and what not to do. And this was very awkward. Maybe it was after Ambassador Puri left. We are in a situation where some very important neighboring countries are falling under Chinese influence. Nepal happens to be particularly important to us. We've just had a visit to China by Sheikh Hasina of Bangladesh, a visit which we were later on told was cut short. She came back a day earlier because apparently she didn't get her one-to-one with Xi Jinping. But whatever it was, it would appear that China is trying to assert itself in Bangladesh. China has now got a major victory in Nepal. China is already calling the shots in Maldives. China has successfully managed to get the Sri Lankan government to reverse its policy of not allowing Chinese ships of a particular research variety to dock at a particular harbor in Sri Lanka. So all in all, it would appear that we are in a situation where the Chinese would like to surround us with a hostile neighborhood on one hand, and on the other to keep us pegged down as a sub-regional power. That is what China wants in any circumstance, to stop India from emerging as a regional power. So we have to watch and wait the developments, but I do agree with your assessment and with Professor Nalapat's assessment, which is that we must never be perceived to be giving any open advice. We should not make any comments which could be misconstrued. They are hypersensitive on such matters, and so we should adopt a watch and wait policy while understanding that any advice that we give will be misconstrued, and I would hope that this government would be short-lived and would be succeeded by another, I hope soon, which would be more friendly towards India. Thank you.
Ambassador Puri, you've been in Nepal, you've served there. What do you make of this change, and how tantamount is it to India's foreign policy, especially India's, brotherly outlook towards Nepal?
Thank you very much, and I want to thank my senior colleague, Ambassador Mukherjee, for having mentioned. I was India's ambassador to Nepal, by the way, till just a few years back. Look, I want to point out a few things to you. Without going into this China, this is an obvious thing. What you're saying is correct, what Professor Nalapat has said, Ambassador Mukherjee said. It's obvious. We know the India-China dynamic in our region. We know it. And Nepal, it cannot be an exception. Let's talk about the changes, what has happened and what's gone on. Do remember, this is a coalition government. Mr. KP Sharma Oli actually has a few seats in parliament, less than Mr. Sher Bahadur Dioba, the leader of the Nepali Congress. And for all ways and means of thinking about it, as far as we are concerned in India, perhaps among the larger political parties, the one dispensation that we feel kind of, is better disposed towards us is the Nepali Congress. And they are going to be solidly present in the government. So, Professor Nalapat ended by saying that he doesn't expect sort of hysterical actions and so on. Hopefully, the Nepali Congress's presence, which is important, will be a change. I also want to point out to you that Mr. Oli won a landslide election in 2017, of course, in partnership with Mr. Prachanda. And you want to know that in 2018, perhaps two of the most important milestone projects as far as India was concerned finally took off in Nepal. We never were able to get any hydroelectric project going for, 30, 40 years. And the Arun 3 project took off. It's now at a stage where about 50% is complete and about 1,500 megawatts will be generated through this whole thing, which can bring about a sea change in certain parts of Nepal in terms of the economy. We were able to build the pipeline. All of these happened in terms of the bilateral relationship. Prime Minister Modi visited Nepal twice. And let me also draw your attention to the fact that the largest gathering of people that he addressed anywhere in the last so many years of his prime ministership was in Nepal, in Janak. So, Mr. Oli is a good politician. He knows how to play his cards. He knows who is important at what stage of his particular thing. But he's a wily politician. Let me make another point. In 2021, he was removed twice from his office, not by a vote of confidence by the Nalapat, but by rulings of the Nepal Supreme Court. And the reason was that, having lost Prachand's confidence, he wouldn't have the majority in parliament. He wanted to dissolve the parliament, but the Nepalese constitution demands that every effort be made within the parliament to keep it running, and that's what the Supreme Court did. It removed it. Now, from 2021 till now, both Prachanda and Sher Bahadur Dioba have sat on the throne, if I may use that expression. Certainly, Mr. Oli must be feeling, why not me? And let me also say this to you. Between these various people, while there's no question of untouchability, everyone is fine with everyone. there are certain personal dynamics which are at play. I am sure the way I look at this particular thing is the Nepali Congress particularly perhaps was not happy with Prachanda and the way things were going, because it wasn't just Prachanda. There is a new young people's coalition also which is there, and some of those activities were such that these old established parties, the Nepali Communist Party and the Nepali Congress, who know each other right from the king's days and have been at each other and in a kind of partnership, kind of know each other. So it's a kind of share the spoils. Why let the small guys wag the dog, as they say? And I would look at it like this, and I see that, look, what they've done, it smacks of instability, a parliament in which there's no clear majority. They are playing their games. This is what the Nepalese have been doing all throughout. But for us, within this, there's also scope and opportunity, because there is the Nepali Congress, which is in there, which is important. And of course, Mr. Oli is not all that overall powerful. And so if you play your cards right, and of course, we have to counter the Chinese aggression, that's important.
All right, sir.
There are opportunities that can come.
All right. Professor Muni, what do you see in this? Ambassador Puri is of the opinion that there is perhaps an opportunity in this. But considering the hard line that Prime Minister Oli has taken in the past against India, how circumspect do we have to be?
I think we must understand Nepal not ideologically nor necessarily in the India-China context, but within the Nepali context. And let me tell you 2-3 things very clearly as I understand them. Number one, the Nepali politicians are all power seekers. They will seek support from wherever they get. They get it from China, they get it from India, whatever it is. The present change should be seen in terms of the fears of the Nepali Congress and Oli, because Prachanda had launched certain investigations against corruptions at very high places in both these parties, and they did not want to accept it. Therefore, they had to come together despite their obvious and clear contradictions, which everybody knows, not only with us, but in Nepal, everybody knows those contradictions. Secondly, Oli feared that Prachanda was being prompted to have an alliance with Devba, and he wanted to subvert it. Therefore, he jumped the line and went to Devba and proposed this kind of an alliance, which has really come through. So you must see it in the context of domestic politics to begin with. Secondly, since we are all interested in India and China, let me add a couple of points. Number one, on China, China has its own deep stakes in South Asia. This is not the China before the 21st century. This is the China of 21st century, which has deep stakes in South Asia. And whether India or South Asian countries like it or not, they will push themselves in. That's why you see them everywhere. We don't have time to go into the details, but please understand in terms of China's own requirements and China's own objectives. Therefore, we cannot push them out of South Asia, and they are capable of nursing their ambitions, their aspirations, their objectives, whatever they are. Number one. Number two, the Nepalese go towards the Chinese side only to show their anger and resentment vis-a-vis India. At least 70% of this is true, whatever the other reasons are. Therefore, whenever they feel alienated, they feel dejected, they go and have towards China. Oli was one of India's best friends. I mean, when we recall 2015 and 2017 and 2018, we forget that in 1998, the Mahakali Treaty was the handiwork of Mr. Oli, who was in the Communist Party. So don't judge the communists as communists. They are no more communists. They are power seekers. All of them are, no matter whatever their title is, whatever their designation is. So this is what it is that we must not alienate them. And once we alienate them, they run into problems. We run into problems. Now, in addition to this present change, you know, when Prachanda visited on Prime Minister Oli's inauguration, he was prompted to shift the alliance. Why was he prompted? He was prompted because it was seen as if his foreign minister, Naran Kaji Shrestha, was opening up links with China again. His visit was in China later on, and the BRI was being activated. The Prachanda had put it on hold, but it was being activated. So we prompted them to, because in our perception, and that is the right perception of India, government of India's, that China wants to consolidate communist unity in Nepal. The communist unity existed under Prachanda and Oli alliance, and whatever the alliance, even earlier it existed under them. Earlier also we broke them. Earlier also we prompted them to shift to, prompted Prachanda to shift to Deoba. This is how he has been oscillating between these two leaders for his own party and because of whatever else it is. Therefore, we would have preferred if Prachanda had had an alliance with Deoba, but Deoba was not acceptable for that. And before doing that, the Oli had already moved closer to Deoba and accepted most of his terms, except for he being the first prime minister. So on that, and once we found that is not possible, then the second best alliance is let it be between Deoba and Oli. Because as I said, Oli is not completely written out of India's consideration books, whatever you call it. And Prachanda, and that would break the communist consolidation. Because if Oli goes there and Prachanda and other communists go separately, which has happened in the present case, I mean, that equally, as Ambassador Manjeev Puri said, we can manage with that kind of a coalition. So the present coalition is something which we think we can manage. And I think we would be able to manage, provided the basic principle that these Nepalese leaders are power seekers. The moment you give them an indication that your blessings are not with them, they will try and drift. And that is where the problem is. So understanding Nepal, in my mind, needs a lot of homework in South Bloc.
Okay.
A lot of homework in our media also.
All right. So Gautam, does that mean that we have, somehow not been successful in understanding Nepal and Nepalese politicians?
Well, listening to all the panelists, I'm pretty sure we do know a great deal about Nepal. It is just that we can't do anything about this constant flux. It is something that happens in a country with very few natural resources and an unwillingness to be consistent in terms of developing them, for example, hydroelectric power, and where politics has become toxic. It is, it shifts between morning and afternoon, and evening is a plotting time and morning is another new day. This was, written about in sort of hyperbolic terms with regard to South America, where you had a coup every third day. Here you don't have coups and, much bloodshed ever since the monarchy was ousted in less than savory circumstances, as Professor Nalapat hinted at, in which, unfortunately, India had a hand. We just have not been able to, do very much to earn the Nepali politicians' trust, though I do believe the Nepali people are very well inclined towards India, and which is a problem for the politicians. They may form alliances that are unstable and keep shifting, but the people are really not interested in either being communist or being anti-Hindu or, all of the kind of anti-India rhetoric that some people would like to promote. They know that they're landlocked. They know they have access through India, and it's an age-old relationship. There are many Nepalese and people of Nepalese origin in India, in the border areas and farther afield. So this is something that the politicians cannot wish away. They can make their difficulties amongst themselves. And China, as the elephant in the room, it is entirely true that China is pushing its way into every one of the ASEAN, countries in our littoral, and except for India. They haven't made any progress in India, even though they menace us wherever they can and along the borders constantly. It's costing a lot of money on both sides, but from their point of view, it's probably worth it. And from our point of view, it's certainly improving our military capabilities. China is, however, geopolitically on the wrong side of history now. It has overplayed its hand and is being looked at very closely by the West in terms of trimming it down, cutting it down to size. And it is happening and will constantly keep on happening. It is a matter of power politics as much as the trade aspects tend to slow it down. Europe and America are dependent to a large extent on on Chinese trade, Chinese manufacturing, Chinese supply lines, but it can't be helped. China has to be brought down in order for the West to survive. And that will have a knock-on effect in our area as well, I'm happy to say.
Well, I don't need to top what you've just said, Gautam. You, in fact, synopsized, for the lack of a better word, what everybody, in fact, intended to say.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.